The 24-25 Women's Super League is on winter break and it gives us a perfect chance to assess every team's season so far. We discuss whether they've met expectations in the first half of the season, what transfers they need to do in January, and predict the second half of the campaign. Today we talk about Brighton. They've been the revelation of the 24-25 season and we discuss how they've managed to achieve this, whether the performance level is sustainable, and where Dario Vidosic ranks amongst the best coaches in the league. We also look at how they should be approaching recruitment in January and whether they actually need any reinforcements. This is our mid-season review for Brighton. Alright, let's continue our mid-season reviews. Then today we are on to the revelationary side of the season, Harry. Brighton.
Wow, what a start to the season. Credit to Brighton, credit to Dario Vidosic, because what a first 6 months in charge for Vidosic. They've been incredible. They've beaten some top teams. They've got some cracking results across the season. They've been pretty consistent across the first few months, and they're flying in the table. They're fair play to them because they've got it right. They're a brilliant summer, and they got it right off the pitch. They've got it right on the pitch, and they go into this winter break, a well-deserved break, because they've been superb.
Yeah, it feels like with the benefit of hindsight, one that we should have seen coming. Brighton have been building towards this for a few years now. I think the Vidosic appointment was very underrated in the summer because it came, the other appointments in the league were so much more exciting, or at least looked exciting. And Sonia von Pastor obviously at Chelsea. He had Robert De Paul coming in for a very successful stint at Leverkusen. And Amandine Mikel, whose Reims side are really exciting last season. They all came into WSL, so people were focusing on those, not really focusing on the fact that Brighton had got Dario Vidosic. And I think a lot of that transfer business, while it was pointed out as extraordinary, no one really thought, they'll be right up there. Yeah. But they have been very competitive this season. Recent weeks, it started to fall off a little bit. They had, a draw with Tottenham. They lost to Chelsea. It's seen them slip from 3rd to 5th. But overall, a really good season for Brighton so far. And they'll be looking to kick on in January, take momentum from what's been a really good start to the campaign, and see where they can go.
Yeah, very much so. As you say, they're transfer business in the summer was really good. They got a lovely balance between experienced quality players like Kirby, like Paris, like Kankovic, and then they brought in some really young up and coming talents like Bruno Villamaya, etc. And for Brighton, they can do that in January. They can just reinforce a little bit. For me, they're a couple signings away from turning a few of those bad results into better outcomes. If it wasn't for their trips to North London, though, their games against North London clubs, for me, their season would be faultless. The only problems I've had is the draw to Tottenham wasn't a great performance, and the loss away at Arsenal was really bad. Apart from that, they've lost to Chelsea, they've lost to Man City and drawn to Man United. That's not bad at all. That's not a bad campaign at all. So apart from a couple games here and there, they've been really, really solid, and I think a lot to look forward to in 2025. And that's the big question: is can they keep it up? But overall, in the first 6 months, a tidy season.
Yeah, that's what I was going to move to. Is that performance sustainable? I think you look at the end of the year, that loss to Chelsea, the draw with Tottenham. The question I have is, was that a blip, or is that does that point towards a more severe issue, that there will be that downturn performance? Because they did have a really good start to the season. It was slightly overperforming in a lot of metrics. They were getting somewhat fortunate in games. Not that they weren't playing well. It was just that they weren't producing. They were scoring more than they were creating, in a sense. Yeah. The chances they were creating weren't meriting the goals they were scoring. So there was always going to be a drop-off. The question is, how sustainable was that performance in the first few months of the season? And are we reading too much into that Chelsea and Tottenham result, or is there a more severe issue there?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it will become evident once we're back from the winter break. But this is a key winter break for Brighton, as you say, falling off towards the end of the year. Use this break to pick yourself, to pick that energy level back up. Come back in January with the same intensity that they came in with the start of the season. You think back to that Everton game on the opening day. Absolutely phenomenal. If they can repeat that again, if they can find that level again at the start of 2025, they're on for a nice season. But yeah, they're going to have to be careful here. I think Vidosic has shown that he is a pretty heads up and smart coach. He will know that they've got to be careful that they don't fall away, they don't drop off due to those last couple of results, and hopefully for Brighton's sake, he will notice that and they will make sure that doesn't happen. But overall, I think it'll be interesting to see. Maybe a couple additions could be the difference to whether they drop off or not. We'll have to wait and see. They might get... I'm intrigued to see what they do in the transfer window as well. I'm intrigued to see if they get very busy, because they've got a decent squad, but obviously you're never gonna say no to improving in areas.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think last summer what they did a lot was improve the ceiling. There's probably still some gaps in their squad, though. I think if some of those key players were to get injured, suddenly the quality of the squad, the quality looks a lot lower. They've been quite fortunate with the fact that they haven't had any major injuries, really. And in terms of what they need to do in January, for me, it's about renewing contracts. We're not 100% sure on who is expiring this summer and who's not, because that information isn't easily accessible in the women's game, unfortunately. But we do know, for instance, Maria Thorisdottir, her contract expires this summer. She's been really key for them this season, so that's someone that they'll be looking at having to renew in the next few weeks, or before the summer, obviously. There will be other players in that squad who joined the summer before last who are only on a 2-year contract, and that will be coming to an end. And I think the biggest issue that Brighton had over the last summer was those contract expiries. Obviously, we saw Elizabeth Turland go, who was such a phenomenal presence for them last season. And I mean, that is the key one, but there were others. I think they'll be keen to avoid that again. The other thing they want to do with contracts is look at who's available on a pre-contract, so signing them for 6 months' time, because that's when their contract expires. Obviously, quite famously documented is Chloe Kelly, who expires this summer. I think that is one they'll be all over. You've only got to look at what they did with Fran Kirby last summer.
Yeah.
I think Nikita Paris was another one who only had a year left on their contract, so they could buy her for a bit of a cut price deal. I think if they could get Chloe Kelly as well, that is a huge coup for Brighton.
That would be absolutely huge, and that's the kind of signing that could take them to another level. But as you say, for me, if they maintain the performance that they had in the first half of the season, they will finish comfortably in 5th. And then at that point, they can start setting up for what they're going to do in the summer. Start building on to next year. How can they break into that top 5? How can they maintain this level for another season? For me, the performance right now will be good enough to finish top 5, because what on earth's going on in the bottom half of the table, nobody knows. They keep swapping positions. Either they all pick up points or no one picks up points. That relegation fight seems pretty large, because for Brighton, they've got a lovely 6-point gap to Tottenham. I'd be surprised if that was to be bridged at any point in the season. They've just got to keep... If Brighton beat the teams, Brighton could lose all to the top 4 and still remain 5th for me, because if they win the games they need to win, they'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I do agree there. I think in terms of short-term options for Brighton, there aren't really many areas that I'd be saying they desperately need an improvement in. At times of season, I thought maybe they could do with an upgrade on Bagley. She's done really well in other games, but there have been games where she's had her moments. I think Chelsea was one, for example, where she was particularly poor. A lot of errors in that game. But then Chelsea are a very difficult side to play against. The press Chelsea put on is like no other in the league. So I can see reasons why that wouldn't be such a concern. I think in terms of other areas, it's just about, as I say, that rotation, that depth. If they've got another midfielder in there, it just gives them a bit more legs.
Yeah.
Because I think they have been a little bit light in there at times this season, a little bit leggy towards the end of games. Another centre-back again, because they play with 3 centre-backs now. I think that would be helpful to have another one in there. They're all right, really, for wing-back, because Ollis Larkis, who's been playing in midfield, could cover on either wing-back. They've got McLaughlin and Poppy Patterson anyway for the left-hand side, so they're fairly all right there. And then, obviously, up front, I think they've got more than enough options. Obviously, Michelle Aguimang is only on loan, so she'll go back in the summer, and that'll be something to address in 6 months' time. There's not really any point spending money in that position when that's not happening for another 6 months. In the meantime, they've got Kiko Seike, who has had a really good first game and hasn't done a whole lot else since, but is a reliable option off the bench. I've had Nikita Paris, who's been fairly consistent. Bruno Villamaya, another loanee they'll need to replace, or obviously buy on a permanent in the summer. I think that'll be when Brighton can really show off again, like they have the last 2 summers where they've gone and got those big signings. There's not a lot I think Brighton can achieve in January. It's all about setting up now for the summer. It's about assessing what in this squad is working really nicely, and where could they perhaps find another edge on their opponent. Where can they get closer to that top 4? That for me will be the big test for Brighton, because I think that the foundations are there and they look fairly stable. You don't want to disrupt that with 7 signings in January or something mental like that. If you can supplement the squad with 1 or 2 nice additions, then go ahead and do it. But for me, the focus will be on the summer. I think, as you say, that 5th spot is fairly secure. Tottenham haven't been performing this season. Unless Liverpool go and make loads of signings, which they haven't really had the investment to do, I don't see January being fruitful for them. So And they're the only, and maybe Aston Villa, if they went and signed a few, got the managerial appointment right, maybe they'd be competitive. But that's already 5 points or 6 points in the case of Tottenham. That's 8 points for the likes of Liverpool and Aston Villa. So that's already quite a gap for them to have over other teams. Brighton, realistically, they're not going to qualify for the Champions League. I'm sorry to burst the Brighton bubble there, but they're already 4 points off Arsenal and Manchester United. And I think we've seen this season, although take a game to those sides, there's not evidence that they can beat them. Yeah. And that is a bit of an issue at the moment in terms of how do they bridge that gap to the top four.
Yeah, I think there's the one against Man United, a really good draw at home. That was solid. They scored a goal against the team.
They're one of the only 3 teams to scored a goal against them this season.
And I think that for Brighton, the main focus will be is the errors at the back. Now, at times this season, they've been superb playing out. They've looked really comfortable. But there's been other times where to be honest, they've handed results to football teams. For me, they could have got something out of that. Chelsea did not play very well against them. They could have got something out of the Chelsea game, but to be harsh on Brighton, they handed Chelsea 2 or 3 goals there. They were absolutely poor. The Arsenal game as well, defensive errors and poor, just playing in their own third cost them massively. They would have still lost that game, but I don't think they'd have lost it by 5. And I think that would be the only area where Vidosic will want to sharpen up over the winter break. Is they have to cut out the errors, especially if they want to beat those bigger teams. They get away with it sometimes against the bottom lot, but against the bigger sides, they do get punished. If they cut out those errors, if they stop giving the ball away in their own penalty area at times, then they could pull off some fantastic results. They could have got a point or 3 against Chelsea if they hadn't handed them so many goals. And that'll be a point of frustration for Vidosic, but overall, they're a really decent campaign. If they just sharpen up in that defensive third in certain games, then they could be soaring.
I mean, they conceded 2 to West Ham, and just Katrina Gorey. That was when she just decided she wanted to score more goals.
She kept shooting.
Exactly. But I think you're right in addressing where those issues lie for Brighton. It's that when you look at the difference between them and the sides in the top 4, the points aren't too different, but they have conceded 8 more than anyone in the top 4, and obviously 13 more than Manchester United, who are just a place above them, and they've only scored 17, which is more than Manchester United, but it's 3 less than Arsenal, 4 less than Manchester City, and 14 less than Chelsea. Now, that is a ridiculous standard, admittedly, but I think if they want to bridge that gap, it's how do they concede less and how do they score slightly more, and then they're on that level. So it's been incredible from Brighton so far. And again, you look at those goals conceded against Chelsea, against Arsenal. They're the games that make a difference. That's 9 goals there. You take those away, and they've only conceded 7 this season, which then puts them in the conversation with those top 4 sides. So I don't think it's necessarily a big issue yet. They are just not on the level of those top 4. The draw against Tottenham will be a concern. Again, if you take that result away, suddenly they're only 2 points off the top 4. I think with that result, Champions League football was probably out of reach anyway, but now it definitely is. But they should get 5th. Yeah. And that's a really good season.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was probably Tottenham's best performance of the season. I mean, that's not saying much, but
Tottenham's only performance of the season.
Yeah, apart from Personality Day and Brighton on the last game of the year for Tottenham. But for Brighton, I mean, they'll fancy a cup run. I think they'll really fancy a cup run.
Obviously, they've got the FA Cup game against Durham. That should be a comfortable win. And then who knows from there? Could they go quite far into the competition? It all depends on the run. So it's quite difficult to speculate on the FA Cup for the small sides because if they go and draw Chelsea in the next round, I have a very different opinion to if they go and draw Fulham. So it can be very, very different. But I think they should beat Durham. Yeah. I could see a run to the quarters, maybe even the semis, similar to like Leicester did last year. I think that could be what Brighton are able to do. And then obviously Women's League Cup as well. They play Arsenal. It's going to be a tough game, but I think they'll be really keen to prove that 5-0 loss was extraneous.
Exactly that. Even if they only lose that game 1-0, it either shows that Arsenal played really badly, but for put it in a more positive light for Brighton, I think it would show that they have improved in those areas. If they just stop giving the ball away in their own penalty area, and they will be all right. But it is. I feel like the games after the winter break for Brighton are absolutely critical. Get them right, and they'll find themselves comfortably in the top half. Get them wrong, and they're going to have to be a little bit careful.
Well, they come back for Liverpool, Manchester United. Now, obviously, Liverpool on their day are a very challenging opponent. Right now, they haven't been, but if they have a few players back from injury, they do make some signings in January. That could be a really difficult game on that Friday night. Then obviously Manchester United the weekend after that's going to be a difficult one.
That's a tough one.
But we'll be interested to see how they play in that. But I think their run is quite kind. Their big games are split up. They play Crystal Palace, West Ham, and then Chelsea. They play Tottenham, Leicester, and then Manchester City. They play Liverpool, Everton, and then Arsenal. Those games there are games in between. So I think they can build momentum and then, just worry about those big games every now and then, especially if you consider that, the Manchester City game could be played in between two quarter-final games. I think Manchester City, it's at the end of March. So that will be, Man City will be in the Champions League quarter-finals around that time. So they may well have to rest up against Brighton. If they get through as well, they'll have to consider the semi-finals. The same for the Arsenal game in May. If Arsenal somehow get to the Champions League semi-finals, then that's something they're going to have to think about. So there are. It's going to be really interesting, but I think Brighton can take advantage of the fact that other teams, will have other competitions to think about. So maybe we'll see them pick up some big scouts in the second half of the season. For me, it's about can they sustain their performance levels against the lower half teams throughout the second half of the season, and could they challenge those top 4 teams on occasion? Because that's what they're still left to prove.
Yeah, it's one of those where for me, I personally don't think they'll get better. It's more of a case of will they get worse or will they maintain the level?
Unless they go and sign Bon Mati.
Well, if they did that, then I might change my opinion. But even though they don't sign Bon Mati, which they're not, I can tell you that much. But
you never know.
They could come out and surprise us again. I sit here and go, I don't think they'll get better. But what if they do? What if they come out and they beat Arsenal in the League Cup and get a result Man United away, and suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute, are they going to win the League Cup and get Champions League football? I don't think that's going to happen. But they've surprised us once already. Can they surprise us again? But even so, 5th place is a phenomenal season from where they were last year. Even if it's because sometimes you don't go. You might think, they've only gone up a couple places in the league, but the difference between those couple of places is absolutely huge. They've gone from being in the relegation fight to suddenly challenging for the top 4, top 5.
Yeah, the most important number for Brighton this season is not the one that comes at the start, which shows they're in 5th place. It's the one that comes at the end. That point tally, the fact that they're in the competition with the top sides and they're not in any conversation for relegation, that's really positive for Brighton. That's what they'll look to continue on. Vidosic has done really well this season. My biggest intrigue is going to be to see how he adapts that tactic, how he evolves as a coach, because managers will figure out what they're doing. Because they are smart, they've all got data teams behind them, they can all watch the games themselves, they'll all be analysing what Brighton are doing before they play them. The question is now, when Chelsea come, when Manchester City come, when Arsenal come, what answers has Vidosic got to the questions they're going to pose? Because they are going to come out and they are going to be threatening. Can Vidosic adapt sufficiently to play against their side? Can he come up with something else to beat those Chelsea? Can he be that move ahead? Because football is a game of chess at the end of the day. And if he knows what they're going to do, if he can predict what they're going to do and adapt to that, then they can get those results. So I think those big games are going to be a real test of his coaching standard. And I think we've seen so far that he is at that high level, and you can mitigate some of those losses with the fact that the squad probably isn't the level of those top sides. The question is now, can they punch truly above their weight? Because the consistency's been good to start the season. They need to sustain that and then see what they get against the big sides.
Well, thing as you say, we spoke about those errors that they handed Chelsea and Arsenal goals, but when you think about why they made those errors, it's because Chelsea and Arsenal knew what they were doing, put the pressure on, and forced the mistake. Brighton are going to have to find a way to deal with that. If not, Chelsea, in a couple of weeks' time, will rock up. They'll do exactly the same thing. They'll force more errors, and they will score more goals. So Brighton going to have to, let's see what Vidosic has got. If they do mix it up, then suddenly that's one heck of a manager and one heck of a team.
And I think there will be a drop off to exploit, whether that's City, Arsenal, or United. I can't say how all 3 of those maintain a good level for the rest of the season. They've all got to play each other. Which is going to be, and United and City have to face each other twice. So there's going to be a drop of points in there somewhere. They've all still got to play Chelsea again. Brighton include that as well, of course, but they've all still got to play Chelsea again. More than likely going to be a drop of points at the moment based on how well Chelsea are playing. So there are opportunities, and it's whether Brighton can take advantage.
They're in a world where, we put it into a scenario, if they beat, when we come back from the winter break, if they beat Liverpool and Man United lose the Manchester derby to City, Brighton are then 1 point behind Manchester United. And then suddenly, they're back in that conversation for the top 4.
Or vice versa. If United beat City, they could be 2 points off Man City.
And then suddenly,
we're in the title fight up until about a week ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens for the rest of the season. But Brighton have been very good. We hope to see that performance maintained. I think that's everything for today. Go back and check out our first 2 installments of the series. Spoke about Arsenal, we've spoken about Aston Villa so far, and of course look out for tomorrow where we'll be talking about the champions, the leaders in Chelsea. Go and check out our video as well from last week. We spoke about one transfer that every WSL club needs to sign, so of course Brighton are included in that, and we graded every team season so far, and again Brighton are in that video, so go and check those out as well. But that is everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.